Hi, it's Michael from the Oilers Live podcast. Let me tell you about Seat Giant. You can find them at seatgiant.ca. We have got a discount for Oilers Live listeners. Just go into Seat Giant and use the discount code Oilers Live, and you get 5% off your ticket purchase. Seat Giant is a great place to find tickets for the events that you want to go see, and it's all in Canadian funds. So remember, go to seatgiant.ca.
Oilers Live Podcast.
Welcome to the Oilers Live podcast. I've got as my guest today Shane Sander, who is a regular contributor for the Hockey Writers, writing on all things Oilers. Thank you for joining me tonight, Shane.
Hey, no, it's a pleasure. It is a Friday night, so, you know, as an Oilers nerd, I guess we're all just kind of, this is the best plans that I had.
Yeah, you know, I mean, hockey fans are hockey fans, right? Doesn't matter the time, but we do a lot of these podcasts on the weekends, and you know, a lot of the guests come on, and I find we're all a little bit of a hockey nerd in all of us, for sure. So thanks for taking a Friday night and joining me. I know we tweeted out on Twitter to see if anybody would be had any questions. We'll see if any come in. I mean, you know, rare that we get many Twitter questions. You know, I wanted to start, Shane. You know, I've been fascinated since I've started the podcast with all of the writers and all of the bloggers and everybody out there, you know, on what and how they got involved writing about the Oilers. By the way, I've been a big fan of yours. I've read a number of your articles, and you've written a number recently. And for anybody who's listening and you don't know Shane, you can find him at thehockeywriters.com. Just go to NHL teams and Edmonton Oilers, and he's one of the main two, I believe. And Shane's always got some great insights in there.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. So let me know, Shane, how did you get a start?
So I started about, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago. Just by chance, I just had a chance meeting with someone on another site. And so I did some small pieces for that site before I ended up just kind of transitioning over to the Hockey Writers. They were hiring at one point in March of 2014. And then that's when I just had to send in my sample writings. And then I got in touch with Bruce Hollingrig and the editing staff at the time. And it just kind of just grew from there. And so now I think I've got over approaching 375 articles soon enough. And that's dating back to 2017. But yeah, lots of Oilers stuff going back through the years. My first story for the Hockey Writers that I actually wrote was on Jason Bond Sr. And the cool thing about that one was that after the post went out, I was like, okay, well, I don't really know how this whole thing works. I'll just put this out on Twitter and we'll see what happens. And I ended up actually getting a direct message from Jason himself. So we had a nice little exchange after the story was written. So yeah, that was kind of where my start happened with this. And then ever since then, I've just whatever comes to mind, if there's something that I want to talk about, I'll just spew out my opinion. And then I got into writing prospect profiles and like thoughts that I've had about prospects and where they were going to be trending. And then I started to find that I'm slowly gravitating a little bit more towards that. I do a little bit of coverage on the Bakersfield Condors as well. Usually about twice a month, I try to write a piece called Condors Report. And it's just pretty much just focused on the AHL squad and what's going on down there in Bakersfield. Yeah, that's pretty much the majority of my content and kind of how it flows. You can follow me on Twitter, SanderTHW. And yeah, that's essentially it.
It's right on. I did let a few people know that I was going to do this interview with you this weekend. They were all pretty excited, and you've got a number of fans, and a lot of these people that I talk to, I value their opinions as folks that follow hockey and know hockey, and they've always liked what you had to write. So I do appreciate you being on, and look forward to doing this podcast today.
Oh, no, I appreciate you having me on. So let's just start talking hockey, I guess.
Yeah, you bet. So, one of the things I wanted to touch on, you've done some recent articles lately, and, probably the most recent one you did was 5 free agents worth of PTO. And, it's not necessarily about the PTO so much, but let's chat about, what it is. Do you think this is a route that the Oilers should take based on their current roster? Do you think they need some more depth in certain areas? Is there something that led to your thinking in writing this article? What was the first thought that went past your mind?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that there's a bit of a depth issue in this with this organization. You've got say if we start with the defense with this club, we know that the 6 guys that are going to be here next year: Klefbom, Larson, Nurse, Russell, Sekera, Benning, right? And then once you get to that 7 spot, that 7 spot's where you've got Kevin Gravel. Kevin's come off of an injury plague start to his career. He's kind of been an NHL, AHL tweener through his time with the LA. He had a bout of Crohn's disease, ended up losing about 40 pounds at one point. He's slotted into that 7 spot right now, and it's his job to lose. Then you've also got Bouchard that's kind of just flirting with the opportunity to maybe start the year with the Oilers, maybe do a 9-game audition to start the year, and then kind of progress from there. But when you look at that, then where do you go from there? You've got Ethan Bear down on the farm system right now. You saw an 18-game audition from him last year. It was obvious that he was struggling defensively. The offensive skills were there. He's still learning how to read and react with the play at the NHL level. The AHL level, he seems to be doing quite well. Caleb Jones came on, got stronger as the year went on, but he's not exactly in that same spot to kind of progress right in and be that number 7. And then you're looking as well, William Lagesson, he's going to be playing his first year in Bakersfield this year as well. And that's essentially your top 3 guys in Bakersfield. And then you've got Kevin Gravel and Evan Bouchard that are just kind of right in the middle there between everybody. If an injury happens, you're going to be jumping back to those young guns right away. And the whole purpose is to kind of keep these young guys in Bakersfield, let them develop, let them play those minutes down there, and get more comfortable and get those mistakes out of their game so when they come up to the NHL level that they're playing a little bit more smoothly. Say if we get up with another situation where, last year Sekera was out to start the year, so the Oilers were jumbling their lines around, and Russell was playing up in the lineup, and you had a lot of Oivitu playing in that spot, and then you had to gravitate towards younger guys just kind of coming in and around. The reason why I wrote the post is because I'm not exactly sold on that tweener spot right now. Because it looks like Bouchard more than likely is going to be starting in the OHL. He's going to be going back to his stacked London Knights team. And that's pretty much a shout out to Sean, because I know that Sean's a huge, huge London Knights fan.
Yep.
And then you got Gravel that's just kind of nicely nuzzled into that 7 spot without any real competition in an 8 spot. So by looking at what was going around, that's why I wrote the piece. And I thought one of the guys that kind of came to mind was Alexei Emelin. Now I know that Emelin's going to be, not exactly looking for a spot where he's going to be sitting at number 7, but right now the guy hasn't had a contract. Nothing's really coming on. I know that there's supposedly been some KHL feelers that have been sent his way. But last year he was a depth defenseman for the Predators. He was playing about 16.53 in ice time. That made him a 5-6 defenseman with the Preds last year. I think that he still sits in that spot where he could be a nice addition for the Oilers if he were to stay on this side of the water. One of the things that I liked about Emelin, and I know that some people are kind of like wishy-washy after what happened to him in Montreal and just kind of how he started to kind of fizzle out in Nashville there, but the guy led the Predators last year with like 181 hits. Mm-hmm. Second guy on that list was Subban, and Subban had 111. When you look across the Western Conference from where he placed, when I looked at the numbers, he actually was within the top 10 in terms of hits. So he's one of the most physical defensemen in the West. What do we say about not the Canucks, because I'm from Vancouver here, but what do we say about the Oilers' defense here? Is that they're just not as physical, they're not as engaging, they're not a very intimidating bunch when you look at them. And they have a tendency of just, if physicality is pressed on them, is that they do start to turn the puck over. I think having a guy like Emelin being someone that can be physical, being someone that can move the puck, he could be a nice little option for the Oilers. But it's something just worth looking into, like if there's a PTO offer that can maybe sway him to maybe come to Edmonton, that might be something worth looking at. The other defender I mentioned was Sabisa. He's more of a right side guy. He's still young, 28. He was in Vancouver here recently. Looked all right, but, obviously, clearly, depth defenseman. But, was kind of like one of those guys that got into Vegas that was like everybody else in Vegas. Everybody overachieved. Everybody pretty much had, like, near career years playing for them. When you look at his ice time, he was averaging about 19 minutes a night for Vegas throughout the season. Over a full year, the 14 points that he had last year, that translates to about like 6 goals and 38 points. That would have led every Oilers defenseman in scoring last year.
So here's something that I looked at that and I saw Sabisa and what's the deal with Sabisa? I mean, he got injured, came back near the playoffs, and then didn't play. He was sat. I got to think that Gallant didn't think he was ready to come back. I mean, you look at Sekera when he came back, he certainly wasn't ready to come back. You think that's the reason he got sat, and what's the reason him not having a contract already? Like to take a chance on this guy that's had 14, it might have been a career year. You're right. I mean, we've seen him in Vancouver, we've seen him in Vegas, and up until last year, it wasn't like he was anything extra special. Why is he not signed anywhere? Is there a word on him? I searched all over to find out kind of what the reasoning was, but I can't find anything other than he didn't play in the playoffs.
I looked into it as well, and I couldn't really find anything either. But then again, I didn't really look that hard at the whole situation. Now, from what I understand from what I've seen from this situation with Sabisa, is that he tapered off in the playoffs because, yes, he did get injured. Slowly coming back, clearly wasn't up at the speed of where things needed to be in the playoffs, and that's why you saw he was getting scratched as the minutes started to fall. But I think a huge downside of that was just his possession numbers. I don't have the fancy stats in front of me right now, but they weren't very good. His Corsi for was very, very low. I think it was I think it was 43%. And then his PDO as well. I think his PDO, he was it showed that he was well overperforming from where he was. But just kind of looking at that, and the fact that now you look across the league, everybody's defense is sort of starting to settle into place. Maybe the guy's asking for a little bit more money. I'm really not too sure as to why he's not signed right now. But if you're looking for someone that can give you some flexibility with some two-way play in that number 6, number 7 spot, if an injury were to happen, I think he fits in nicely. He's shown that he can play up and down the lineup. When Vancouver was just hammered with injuries the other year, Sabisa was able to play up and around. He's obviously not your first top pairing defenseman, but he was able to kind of like in a pinch hit, maybe come up and play for a couple of games here and there when needed. So I like the intrigue of him. I've seen him play, live here in Vancouver numerous times. The defensive game just kind of has to step up, right? I do like how he does assert himself physically, but he needs to assert himself a little bit more physically than someone like Emelin, right? Like Emelin just fits perfectly right into that spot, whereas Sabisa might not. But I like the offensive upside of maybe having someone there that can move the puck out of the zone, that can make safe plays. But then again, you're slowly starting to get in transition where you're talking about safe plays, and now we're talking about Chris Russell again, right? But those are the two guys that I had kind of just picked out from on defense that weren't just going to be like the easy answers like Tobias Enstrom, he's available, someone should take him, Yeah. And then like the same thing that I said about the defense is the same problem that you're running up front, right? You run through the Oilers' top four, and then not to do any spoilers about what my lineup prediction is going to be, which hopefully I'll be able to write something for next week. You got as soon as you get past that 13 number, right, and say if you do have Yamamoto starting the year in the AHL, who's in that 14-15 spot? You're once again having to, an injury's happened. Where are we going to turn? We're going to go back to the youth board. We need the kids to step up. We need to rely on the kids. Whereas maybe what you need to do is get some better vets in that spot to create that bigger buffer between the AHL guys and the NHL guys. So that's where I picked out guys like guys that can play that tweener role where they can also play up and down the lineup, like a Thomas Yurko. He's a bottom six offensive forward. He might be able to help out. One guy I really like is Nick Shore. I think he'd be a really good hand on the penalty kill. He's also been a good face-off guy throughout his career. He's still young. He's a smart guy. Plays a really good two-way game. He's only 25. Another guy I mentioned was a vet, Scotty Upshaw. Generally been like a very good penalty killer throughout his career. Was the second most utilized guy in St. Louis last year. No spoilers, but the number one guy might have been Kyle Brodziak. I don't know. Maybe you have to read the article. So maybe you bring Scotty Upshaw here. But those are just five guys that I just kind of thought might be able to play certain roles within the organization and just be that buffer between the AHL and the NHL club. Just so you allow those guys like Cooper Marody, Tyler Yamamoto, Tyler Benson, you allow those guys to stay down in the AHL for a little bit, just to kind of sink their teeth into it before they eventually start pushing to get to the next level or get to the NHL and be regulars.
Yeah. Yeah, I get where you came with the list. Obviously one of the big questions we have is, how much space is going to be left in the cap once we do what everybody assumes will be a bridge contract for Nurse. Will some of these guys? I'll go back to Sabisa. I'm curious where he ends up and at what price tag. I mean, he was at 3.6 last year. Is he looking for the same? I suspect at 14 points in 30 games or 15 points, I think he had in 30 games, it's got to be pretty likely he's going to be looking for the same. Maybe that's why he's not been signed yet. Nobody wants to take that kind of a risk on him. I've watched Nick Shore lots of times. I'm not as sold on him, but everybody seemed to really like him, yourself included, I guess, in terms of, not as obviously a top six guy, but, bottom six guy. He's, and you're right. He's a decent face-off guy. I don't think he'd be an unwelcome addition to the Oilers. If you're, in terms of exactly as you say, as a tweener, that's, I suppose in that regard, maybe he was a little overutilized on the Flames last year. Maybe they expected too much of him.
I'm going to add another part to that, just to play devil's advocate to where I was, and thinking that, hey, you know what, maybe you give this guy a PTO. Why the hell did this guy play for 3 different clubs last year?
Yeah.
You know, is that maybe something that's scaring some people off as to why he's still around, right? Like, is there something that we don't know about Nick Shore that's as to why he's still left unsigned? He's 25. He's 25. He's a penalty killer. He can skate. He's got good 2A skills. Why is he still not signed? There's obviously some reason for us to know why that's still happening, right? And why did he play for 3 different clubs? So
yeah, I mean, when I watch him, consistency in my mind was always the sort of the key, and sometimes, you know, if you get that sort of if the coach, if that's what he thinks about you, right? I mean, that's where he's going to place you, and he's going to be worried about putting you in those important situations. So, you know what? The other thing is Gulleton knows Nick Shore, right? So
yeah.
If Gulleton would, I'm sure they would go
for the
go
9
to him.
games that he had him. Yes, he knows him.
Yeah. But he knows him enough. I would assume to understand what kind of player they have there if they want to add him. Let's go down. I mean, I'm
just kind of going back to another thing that you just said. Another thing here that like if we rewind back here, you just said another thing about how the coach wants to utilize him and how the coach sees him. I think that's a really interesting thing, because we have a lot of guys on the Oilers right now that have been put into spots where the coach sees them a certain way, thinks of them a certain way, and will only utilize them in that certain way. Case in point, Jesse Puljujarvi, right? I'm just going to throw that out there, and we can move on.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we could do probably a whole podcast on proper utilization of certain players. What is your thought in terms of? I mean, we have, we'll skip over some of this and go and into next year and what you see. I've been kind of working on something in the background. I'm not a writer, first off. If anybody listens to the show, they know I pretty much hate writing, so I don't do it. I've got the Oilers Live website, but I never put much in the way of content on there. So I've maybe written 2 articles and had one of our Twitter followers write 1 article on being a fan in Nevada. But one of the things that I kind of have looked at, and this goes down to the utilization piece. And also, you know, we had Lucic sitting up on the first line all year. You know, I would say utilized not in the right way. Puljujarvi not utilized in the right way. What the big thing for me, though, is on the our power play was awful last year. It started to click, you know, near the end of the season. We've got some new guys. We've got Gulleton. We've got Yanni. We've got some new looks that, you know, can maybe add something to this. Sounds like McClellan has said, you know, it's going to be a little bit more committee in terms of how everything goes. You know, how they make the power play look. If I started looking at the numbers, and, you know, pretty much if you were in the top half of the league on the power play, you were in the playoffs, right? Pretty simple correlation, right? The year prior, we were in the top half of the league on the power play. We're in the playoffs. Do you think that's going to be enough this year to get us there? I mean, judging by this article, you still have some hesitancy on the roster as is. Do you think, though, some of the changes we have, are we going to be at least close on the cusp in your mind?
Well, I think that you've done enough things on paper to move yourself in that direction that, you know, hey, you know what, we've addressed what we needed to do. They brought in Manny Vivrios, who's a power play specialist. That's what he did in the WHL when he was coaching Swift Current. He's going to be the eye in the sky. And what I like about his addition is that by having him up there in the box watching the games, he's going to have a different perspective from where Todd McClellan's going to be watching the game. And so if Todd can kind of come into next year and accept that this guy's going to have a different opinion, this guy's going to see things, and he's going to welcome that opinion on like what we need to do to make changes, I think that's a good step in the right direction. Now, when it comes down to formation and stuff, at the end of the day, it's who you have on the power play, right? Last year, they went back and they just beat themselves over the head with the same formations, the same guys. They were just rotating in and out of the lineup, and it just didn't work. I think that this year, a key part of the power play, though, is going to be having a healthy Oscar Klefbom, one that can actually shoot the puck this year. And then as well, once you move in, you've got stability on the second power play. If you still want to run a power play that's got 4 forwards and 1 defenseman on the first unit, and you want to go to something a little more traditional, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen on the second unit. I know last year they flirted back and forth between pretty much riding 8 forwards and 2 defensemen versus riding 7 forwards and 3 defensemen on that power play. But this year, you've got guys that can play on that second power play unit with Darnell Nurse, Andre Sekera. Those are your guys that are going to be playing defense. Last year, the Oilers were one of the lowest scoring teams from the defense. So that has to change this year. You need to get these guys. You need to get Klefbom, a healthy Klefbom that's playing a full season, scoring some goals. You need to get Darnell Nurse to take another step forward. But you're also going to be relying on Andre Sekera to have a bounce-back year on a healthy knee and be able to get back to where he was in 2016-17, where arguably he was one of the Oilers, if not for Klefbom, was the Oilers' best defenseman. So starting with the back end, I'm looking at 3 defensemen here that can help. But once you get up front, you've got Connor, you've got Leon, and you've got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Those are your 3 big guys. You look at a team like Pittsburgh, who's got Malkin, Crosby, Kessel. Those are 3 premier scoring guys that you have rocking your power play. And they're spreading them out because they've got the right depth players with those guys that they can spread them across 2 units. Edmonton, for a lot of times last year, was riding those guys on the same, like they were riding Connor with Leon. Or if they split up Connor and Leon, they didn't. Who's Connor and Leon going to play with? Lucic had probably one of the worst years of his career. You're banking on Ryan Strome to kick it up. That never happened. Puljujarvi, for whatever reason, they rarely use them on the power play. And then suddenly you got Ty Ratty, who's this AHL, NHL tweener that's now sitting on the first power play unit. I think next year what they're looking at right now is a natural progression of all the forwards to just, clean slate. Everybody had a bad year, and now we're going to be able to move forward with these guys. But that being said, though, is like, how do you utilize your power play when you don't exactly have a true scoring winger or a true scoring guy outside of McDavid, Draisaitl, right? Like, are you really going to be banking on Milan Lucic to turn around and suddenly go back to his old form? No. I think when you look at the wingers through this whole entire organization, there's a question mark with everybody. So, can the power play improve? Yes. Do they have the right personnel? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. I keep asking pretty much every guest I have, what's the aberration, right? Was it the year before last, or was it last year? Or is it somewhere in between? And I think most of us agree it's probably or likely somewhere in between. Is it more towards the year we made it to the playoffs? We haven't changed much, right? Obviously, over the and we can't. I mean, obviously, it's no big secret that we're in a bit of a cap crunch. But we need to see something. One of the big things I thought from last season was, we underestimated the just how much not having Sekera in the lineup would change the dynamic of this team defensively. And and when he did come back, I mean, I wouldn't really say he came back, right? So the big question is,
he never got back
how
to
does
the
he
same
perform?
level that he was in 16-17 now.
Yeah. So, what do we see this year? Which Sekera do we see this year? And are we playing with 5 good D and one guy that's, a fraction of what he was? I mean, it's a good question, and so we'll wait and see. He's obviously I think defensemen peak typically around that 29-year-old range. So Sekera's on the twilight, and hopefully we don't see decline year over year like too much. I guess that's the big question for me is where does Sekera fit into this defense, and how much does he, his ability to play shield the other players? I think if you got a guy that can come in, be a real driving force, veteran force, which Sekera was 2 years ago, he shields players like Clefbaum and Nurse and allows them the chance to develop and maybe have some confidence in their play. And what's your thought on Clefbaum? So we did have one question from one of our good friends here, Kelly from Beer League Heroes. He says, and this is relevant to what we're talking about, how many points do you think Clefbaum, Sekera, and Nurse put up this season? Craig Custance from The Athletic has said that in his article that we don't have any offensive D-men going into the season. What's your thought on that?
Going back to what I just said about having those 3 guys as your offensive guys, and then having, Matt Benning slide into your 4th best offensive D-man. I don't know if I'd agree that the Oilers don't have an offensive guy. I think they do. They've got, Clefbaum just had the other year when he was healthy through all 82 games. The guy posted 38 points, 12 goals and 38 points. I think that if you get a healthy Clefbaum this year, because this is the big thing that we're talking about again, we're talking about health. Clefbaum was not healthy last year. Sekera was not healthy last year. You lost Benning for a little bit, if I recall correctly. You're ravaged on the back end again and so you got little support on the backside. You're having to rely on youngsters that are unproven, that are still developing. That's why Ethan Bear came up. But now if you get these guys back in a situation where they're healthy, yes, power play can improve. And when you look at the offensive numbers for where a Clefbaum, where a Sekera, where a Nurse is, I think those numbers can improve. Kelly's question here is how many points do I project that they have? I'm just going to throw these numbers out. They're not exact science numbers. I think if you want to, everybody wants to see a natural progression with Darnell Nurse. Last year, he had 6 goals and 26 points. Is it possible that while he's getting regular power play time, while he's getting a good amount of offensive zone starts, and if he continues to do what he does well, which is skate and get up and join the rush, is it difficult to say that he won't get 10 goals next year? I think he can. I think a safe number for Darnell Nurse might be, say, 10 goals and 32 points. I'd be very happy with that kind of output from Nurse next year. I think Sekera, I know that his 16-17 was, similar to Clefbaum. That was his healthy year, and he put up 8 goals, 35 points. I think that now that he's had that knee injury and that his play did start to slow last year, he needed some time as the year went on to just kind of pretty much hit the reset button. Do I see him getting back to scoring 35 points next year? No, I don't think so. I think if we can get 18 points out of Sekera, I think that's more along the lines of where I think he possibly could go. Let's just, for Kelly's sake here, we'll just say 5 goals and 18 points for Sekera. That's kind of what I am expecting. I think for Clefbaum here, he's the guy. He's the linchpin. He's the guy that's going to be manning the defense here. He's going to be the guy that's heavily dependent on, probably more so than Nurse and Sekera. So the projections for him, though, if I'd like to see him score at least 10 goals next year, and I'd like to see him at least get more than 40 points next year. He's still young. He's got a great shot from the point. The guy just needs to stay healthy for once. He's only had one season in the NHL out of the last 4 years where he's actually played a full schedule, or even at least close to a full schedule. Last year he played 66. And then in 15-16, he only played 30 games, and the year before that, he played 60. I'd like to see a full season out of him again. And injuries, like everybody else here, are going to be a huge factor in this.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on. I mean, it's the expectation
what are your projections?
anyway.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would like to see. I think Clefbaum, if we put him, at over 40 points, and 15 goals, I think part of it is right. If in my mind anyway, is if we get Sekera back for a full season, and he has a good season where he's relevant again on the D line. If we have him, then I think we see increased scoring from Clefbaum again. Again, going back to having somebody, a veteran presence there that can shield him when needed and get him in the right minutes. I think we see him over 40 points and maybe about 15 goals. So let's just say 42 points. Nurse, I think we've got to, and maybe a bridge contract's the right thing for this guy. Like, Nurse is a competitor. And, the one thing I loved about him throughout the season last year is, you never doubted his commitment to playing the game of hockey. Right? Like, he went out every game and just seemed to give it his all. And, I think, again, right, like if you got a healthy decor, you got, the guys being utilized properly, I'd love to see, I would love to see Nurse get some power play time next year. And, it doesn't need to be top power play minutes, but at least second power play unit and see how he does. I see him doing over 30 points. Sekera, I think we've seen, the best we're going to see out of him. If he's good.
I think we're seeing that decline.
Yeah, we're. I shouldn't say definitely, but I would be surprised if we see over 30 points. I'd be happy with the 25 to 30 point range for him, given the fact that he's 32. But if he shows some leadership on that defensive line and gets some good minutes and plays some good defense, then I'm happy with what we see. And Clefbaum and Nurse maybe drive some of that offense from the defense side. I'd be happy with that. And we could see at some point, depending on how the season progresses, maybe we do see Bear come up and play a couple games, and who knows how he, now that he's had a couple games under his belt, how he performs. I doubt very much he's a full-timer or even close to it yet. I mean, he was just so inconsistent on the defensive side, but it'd be nice to see some of these defensemen come in and maybe get a little bit of extra output and go that route. Benning. Yeah. Benning to me is I don't know. I mean, I don't know your thoughts on Benning, but if I was the guy making the calls, I don't know that I would have signed him. I might have used that 1.9 and looked elsewhere. I get I think there's a bit of affection for Matt Benning on this team. Like he's part of the team. He's the one to me that doesn't fit on the defensive line, and I might have used that money to go elsewhere. What's your thoughts on Benning?
Well, just real quick here, let's just go back to Nurse here, and then I'll get right back into Benning. Yeah. You were just talking about power play time, so I wanted to pull this up here. So the Oilers played 11 defensemen last year. Number one in terms of power play ice time last year, Oscar Clefbaum, 2 minutes and 46 seconds per game. You know who was number two? Just guess.
If I had to guess, I would say, and I'm not going to look this up, but was it Larson? I mean, I'm trying to remember who. Ethan Bear, really?
Ethan Bear, 50. And then after that,
Really?
it drops to Sakara at number 3 with 58 seconds per game. You want to know where Darnell Nurse was? 29 seconds in power play time per game.
I know that. I know that he, we knew you weren't asking because he was sitting at number 2. Because we didn't see him even do any power play time till the very tail end of the season. By the time the power play had already bombed, right? I just think he's got the skills for it. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he's fast.
Right with you on that. I think he's underutilized.
Yeah,
I think he's underutilized. I think he should be I think he should definitely be carrying second power play minute time. But we'll leave it at that because I know you wanted to talk about Benning. Benning, the way that I see it right now, he fits into that 5-6 spot right now. Do I see him really progressing to that level where he's going to become a number 4? I don't think so. I think that this is pretty much where you have Matt Benning. I think he'll probably get a little bit more consistent in his play because you're not going to get that whole Jekyll and Hyde thing with him where, he looks great one night and then the next night he just where did last night go? And, he's got that offensive ability. He can contribute from the back end. I think, though, with Benning is that he's not really that strong defensively, at least in my opinion. I think that he fits perfectly into that 5-6 spot right now. If you're going to, with his RFA status, it's either you're going to sign him, you're going to trade him, or you're going to let him walk. I don't think the Oilers are really wanting to do any of that. I think that looking at their whole defense is that they didn't really want to make any panic moves, and they didn't really want to sit in the situation where they say, hey, you know what, we're just going to completely blow this up. I think Benning gets a pass, and they're going to think that he's going to naturally progress, just like how they're predicting a natural progression for Nurse. Now, where I see Benning is that I essentially see him as a placeholder. I don't see him being a career Oiler. I don't see him, being the answer to all of our problems on the power play. I see him as a placeholder right now. I think he's in that spot until we get another defenseman that's more NHL ready within their development, where eventually an Ethan Bear, a Caleb Jones, but even though Jones plays the left side, like a Ladjison, one of these youngsters come up and they work their way into the defense. I think until that happens, you're going to see him kind of holding on to one of those spots. I would have explored trading him just to see what his value would have been. But you've also got that the Swedish defenseman that they signed this year. Who knows if he's even going to come over? I know that he's Joel Pearson is going to be signed and loaned to Vachko this year. If I'm even saying that correctly, so he signed and loaned to Vachko this year. And at the end of the year, the Oilers do have recall rights at any point in the deal. They can call him over to North America. But he's probably going to play the entire year in Sweden. Next year, he's an RFA. Maybe if he has another great year, maybe he's the guy that's knocking on that door. So, is Benning expendable? I think so. But is he expendable right now? No, because it's not that guy that can step into that spot. So he's holding that spot until someone else is able to do that.
Yeah. I guess those are good points. You're right. I mean, what are you going to do?
Are you higher on Benning? Do you think that he can be a top 4 guy? Or
no, not at all. I mean, I think he. I just so inconsistent. I thought last year. I mean, I suppose that part of that though. Last year is it's such a hard way to really analyze these players last year, right? The loss of Sekera meant so much to this team and to the defensive core. Guys were being used where they shouldn't have been used, right? I mean, you're asking a lot of, what Darnell was 22 last year, 22-year-old defenseman to play the kind of minutes he was playing, right? You're asking a lot of, even for that matter, Clefbaum, who I think, he should be, I think, further down the maturity level but I still think we were asking too much of him. And Benning, definitely way too much of Benning, right? I mean, this was his second season in the NHL, and he was probably getting more minutes than I don't know what his average minutes were last year. I'd have to look it up, but I mean, I always think a guy like Benning is best if you never notice him, right? Like if you didn't
really nail that right on.
Yeah, and last year I noticed him too often, right? Like it was just a matter of there were some games where he'd get out on the ice and I just cringe watching him get out there and make some of the plays that he was making. He might be 24, but he's second year in the league, and I think that maturity in the league means more than the age does, and for me that was just the way he presented himself, right? We may be pleasantly surprised in the way his game shapes up this year. If he was to do 20 points this year and play a fifth or sixth defensive role and get some reduced minutes, I think could be ecstatic. I've questioned still $1.9 million, but I think though, and I've argued this on the podcast before and with people, I think we always pay a premium in Edmonton for players, no matter who they are, right? I think there's an Edmonton premium. I hate to say it, I love my city. It's my hometown. But I think that if a guy has the option to play, in Florida and considering the taxes and everything, or, in LA and, or wherever, they'd probably take less to go there, right?
Weather and lifestyle are the two important things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With Benning here though, I think the ice time he is getting is fair. I think that you do want to keep him in that 5-6 spot and then utilize him as a power play guy. But in my line of where I'm looking at this is that you want Klefbom to be the number one guy on the back end, and you want him to actually take that mantle. Then you've got Nurse that you want to see him take another progression. I want to see Sekera bounce back. Those are my 1, 2, 3 guys that I want on the power play on the back end, and then Benning sits in my spot 4. Now, naturally, just kind of seeing how the season progresses or whatever, you'll probably start to see Benning utilize more on the power play. I know that's he is one of the most utilized defenders on the power play behind. If you look at the regulars from last year, so we're scratch and bear from that, it was Klefbom, Sekera, and then Benning as the number 3. I think the ice time that he gets is warranted. It is fair. But I think we're going to see the same thing that he had last year. We're going to see a lot of ozone-protected starts. We're going to see second power play unit time. Just situations where we're trying to shelter his defensive weaknesses. Not that I'm saying that he's overly weak defensively, but his game's just not as strong as some of the other guys that we might have defensively. But yeah, just for next year alone, I just see him just tightly snuggled into that 5-6 spot, playing around like 17, 18 minutes a game. If he can produce like he did this year, with another 20 points, and like we're saying, we're taking away we're arguing to take power play time away from him. But if he still manages to produce and he's helping on the power play, is 20 points again out of the question? I don't think so. But just from where I see where his defense is evolving and where it's eventually going, Evan Bouchard is a right side defenseman. Eventually you put all these factors together. His days are numbered in that 5-6 spot. But then again, you're also looking at where the rest of these guys end up going, right? So that's just my 2 cents on Bear or not Bear, but Benning where I see him right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty accurate. So, what I'll take from this conversation tonight is maybe a little open my mind a little bit more on betting. As I said, he was too noticeable for the kind of player that I think he needs to be. I'm hoping this coming year he just fits nicely into that sixth spot, and nobody says anything about him except for when he's got an all-star kind of game going on, and hopefully we get more of those than usual. We're getting close, to 11:30 out here, and I guess it's a little bit earlier out there.
10:30.
Let's kind of wind it down a little bit, and I think we focused actually quite a bit on defense this year, or our defense this episode, and I think that's a good, we don't talk about that maybe as much. When you got a guy like Connor McDavid on the team, you tend to focus on, where he's playing and what he's going to do. So this was kind of a good conversation, a good step away from sort of the obvious Oilers commentary. What's your thought? Let's stick with defense. We'll wrap the episode up. What's the worst possible thing we could do with Bouchard this year, and or what's the best thing that could happen? What Staples recently wrote an article that, which I'm sure you read, was that the best thing that happened was for him to have that bad game. At first I thought, where are you going with this? And then I read it, and I kind of agree with him. Having that one bad game, and the Twitterverse got on him for it. To me, it was ridiculous, but I think it right set expectations for Bouchard. What's your thought, and where does he go? He's clearly an offensive talent on defense.
Well, I really like the drafting of Bouchard. When I remember watching that draft, and you see the names start to come off the board. Okay, so we're sitting there watching the thing go off. So there goes Dahlin, there goes Svechnikov, there goes who ended up going 30. I'm just blanking out. Brady, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. You knew that he was going to end up moving up because Montreal was advocating that they wanted to get a center. You see him come off, and then you see Tkachuk go, and then you're sitting there, and at 5, I was like, okay, so we knew that Kotkaniemi was going to go 3. We knew that Tkachuk was either going to go 4 or 5. Okay, so Arizona's going to take, you're sitting there looking at your draft board, and I was like, okay, so I'm looking at the list as it's coming through, and all of a sudden Arizona goes off the board and takes Hayton. And you're just like, whoa, that was a little bit out of left field because, Hayden, good defenseman, playing for a Stack 2 St. Marie team. People thought that he didn't exactly shine the way that he could have because he was, on a deeper lineup, didn't get those frontline minutes that some of the other guys did. So it wasn't as noticed, but it'd be more of a secret. So, okay, so Arizona is really going off the board with this pick. So you're like, okay, so Zadina is going to go next. So Zadina goes. And then you watch the Canucks pick. You're like, okay, so now we're looking at Vancouver. Vancouver's taking a D. It's either Dobson, Bouchard, Hughes. Who are they taking? They take Hughes. Okay, so Chicago's up. They take Boqvist. And you're like, okay, so now you're watching. Okay, so Dobson. You got Dobson and Bouchard. They're still available. And then suddenly the Rangers take Kravtsov, which surprised me because I thought that they were going to be going. I knew that in the hours leading up to it, I started to hear a little bit more that the Rangers are going to go with a forward. But I was still expecting them to be sitting there, Oliver Wahlstrom's there. Noah Dobson's still there as a defenseman. Evan Bouchard's still there as a defenseman. And they went off the board, took Kravtsov a couple of spots earlier than I thought he was going to go, so not exactly off the board. But that surprised me because then all of a sudden you sit there at 10 and you're just like, holy crap, you got a choice between the top scoring defenseman in the OHL. You got a chance at taking the guy that was the number 1 defenseman for the team that won the Memorial Cup.
Yeah.
Or you got a guy that's got the potential to score 40 to 50 goals sitting next to McDavid on his right side. So who do you take? And so, I think Edmonton was spoiled this year. And so they took Bouchard. But now, obviously, the Islanders had the next 2 picks, so naturally they take Dobson, they take Wahlstrom. So now you're looking at this, well, I hope that they took the right guy out of these 3 because they already got burned on that Reinhart-Barzal deal. They already got burned on that on the Everly-Strome deal. Like, is this going to be number 3? I hope not. But, I'm happy with the Bouchard pick. I think that this is going to be, it addresses an organizational need that this franchise hasn't had in years. Like, who was the last true, like, offensive defenseman that they had? Sheldon Surrey, right? Like, on his back 9 of his career. You finally got one, and I think it's been about if you go back to what was it, the last 10 years or so, they haven't taken a right side defenseman within their first 2 picks. So naturally, it created this hole for them, and now they're addressing it. So on paper, I think it's a great move. Where I see him next year now, just kind of circling back to the question, he's going to be entering camp, and everybody's going to have an open book for him. I think that if he comes in and he deserves the opportunity and he forces your hand, similar to what Yamamoto did in preseason last year, I think it warrants to give him that 9-game audition. What's the worst that's going to happen? Because if you're going to stick him out there with a 9-game audition, what are you going to do? You're going to protect his starts. You're going to not expect him to play top pairing minutes. You're going to let him start in the offensive zone, which is his bread and butter. You're going to put him on the power play, which, feeds right into his game. And you're going to try to stick him with someone that could, be his safety net. Because that's what he needs when he comes in here. That's one option of where this could happen. That's if everything pans out the way that it's expected. Or that's if everything pans out the way that, some fans are dreaming that it happens. The more likely situation, I think he comes into camp, he gets a long, hard look. They test him in all the different spots. They test him on the first power play. They test him on the second power play. They test him defensively. They test him offensively. They throw him right into the pressure cooker in the preseason because that's what preseason's for. And they see what they have with this kid. In the end of things, I think that, I'm kind of tweening between, does he get a 9-game audition? Because I think it's, he's in that spot where he could. But I definitely see him just after that 9-game audition. I don't see him sticking past for the season. I think that he's going to end up back in London, and that's where he's going to be for the rest of the year. He's going to get a chance to play for the World Juniors. He's going to have a pretty decent London team that, could make some noise in the OHL. And then he's going to, he has a chance to improve. Like, is it possible that he could, after scoring 87 points in his draft year, in his draft +1, is it possible that he scores 100 points as a defenseman?
Yep.
So,
it's ridiculous how unfair London is.
I want to just see what happens in preseason before I make a decision. But I think, from looking at the outside in, the way the situation is, it challenges for the 6th spot. But, you look at the defense, the contracts are already essentially in place. So we're just waiting for Nurse's deal to get finalized, which I think should happen in the next week or 2. I think that's when his deal, the Nurse deal will be finalized. But then you got 6 defensemen signed. You've got Kevin Gravelas at 7. Your defense is already essentially there. You're looking for Bouchard now to push someone out of a spot. I don't know if it happens this year.
My feeling on Bouchard, and having watched him, kind of understanding the London Knights from talking with Sean, the Oil Knight, who gets a chance to go out and see them all the time, I think it would be a huge mistake, even if he looked ready in the first 9. I think it would be a huge mistake to keep him on the team this year. Because who knows, unless if you know for a fact after 9 games that you're going to have a successful season, then I wouldn't want him on the team. I would, I might even not, I might keep him for, a little while, like the 9, and not play him all 9, but give him some time in the press box to see how the game's played, and just kind of let him mature alongside the rest of the team. I do hope that no matter what happens, I would love to see the Oilers do what the real successful teams have done year after year after year, which is no matter what the circumstances. Yeah, exactly. So that's my general feeling. I don't think though, I don't think he is fully ready. I think we get fooled a little bit by his size. Like looking at him, he looks like, a fully grown like NHLer. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think we get a little bit fooled by that. And, it'd be good. I think the other thing is that London Knights team is going to be so good. It'll be such an experience for him to play on that team and have a legit shot at Memorial Cup. I just want to, I think that kind of winning culture that a guy like that can bring, if he's on that kind of a team, and then again, as you said, playing in the World Juniors, which there's no doubt he'd be on that team. That'd be great. It would be great for him to go to the World Juniors as well with some confidence in knowing that, even if he's played 9 successful games at the NHL level, and then have that confidence going into the World Juniors and come out and just be a leader. I think those kind of experiences are just great for a player. So my general hope is that no matter what happens, we send him down back to London, and then it's too bad that the rule is in place that he can't go to the AHL. I'd love to see a player like him go to the AHL and compete at the professional level, but obviously that can't happen just with all the rules in place, and London still having his rights. So it'd be but it'd be nice. I think he's got an opportunity to have one hell of a memorable season in the OHL. That team's going to be stacked. Sean is going to have a great year watching some junior hockey for sure.
I'm excited to watch that London.
Yeah. Let's finish it off. Any sort of last thoughts? We focused on defense. Any last thoughts? And then the other, I guess, the last thing is, we'll get you. Hopefully, I can get you on a couple times during the season. But last thoughts on the Oilers, and as we head into preseason is about 40 games away. I think late September, they've got a rookie game in Red Deer, September 27th. So we're actually not that far away from seeing the Oilers jersey on the ice. What's your last thoughts here?
I think when you look at the roster here, I just have a lot of questions. Talbot's going to be playing, north of 60 games again. But how many games are you going to play Koskinen? Because you signed him for $2.5 million. You didn't sign him for $2.5 million to wear a ball cap and sit on the bench for like 60 plus games. You're going to want to play him. So then you look at that, you're like, well, what are they going to do in that, right? Is Koskinen the real deal? Is he going to be able to challenge Talbot? Is he going to be able to push him so that Talbot does play better? And then Talbot just holds on to the net and just doesn't let it go? Got a question about Koskinen because I see him to be very similar to what Anders Nilsson was. And, you have two different Anders Nilsson. You have Nilsson in Vancouver that 1 year, and you have Nilsson in Edmonton for the 1 year. Where's the balance there with Koskinen? Because I think he's very similar. He falls into that, and the Nilsson is a very good comparable there. With the defense, the big question is health. Can they stay healthy, and can they take that next step forward? You're expecting to have Klefbom back. You're expecting him to have a natural progression when he moves forward. You want Nurse to take that step forward. You're looking for Benning to kind of be a placeholder in his spot and to contribute still. But what happens if they run into injuries, right? They're very scarce on the back end when you look at it. And then up front, you've got an entire depth chart down the right side that's a giant question mark. You're running a risky game. This is what happens when you don't have good cap management, is that you run into this thing where you're expecting to kind of get value deals all the time, right? You're asking a guy like Ty Ratty, who has been an NHL, AHL tweener throughout his career. He got his big break playing with Nugent Hopkins and McDavid. But then, looking at him is that he's got to get into the right spots, right? You're expecting him to be a frontline contributor next year, and you're setting him up for failure. And then with Reeder, is he a 2? Is he a 3? Where is he going to play? Puljujarvi, you want him to take another step forward. And then, you've got Cassian sitting there, and then like Yamamoto is going to be starting the year in the AHL. But then what about Kajula? I know that Kelly was saying this a couple months ago that he wanted to wait until Kajula actually popped, because I know they were talking about when is Puljujarvi going to pop. But, it's right. It's like, when are we going to see another evolution from Kajula? Is he going to be able to step up and actually be like a real top 9 contributor? Or is this what we have with Kajula? Is he going to be this, 11, 12, 13 forward? Even Auberg again, we're running into these guys that are falling into the same category of having more questions than answers. So it's going to be an interesting season, because it's the same thing happening this year that happened 2 years ago, where Chiarelli looked at the club, doubled down on his bet, and said, "You know what? This is the horse that we're riding, and this is where we're going." So we're back to this square one where we're doing the same thing. And so I don't know what the definition of insanity is, but I think it's about doing the same thing multiple times over. So I'm just hoping that this sort of breaks the cycle, and that 2016-17 season, which, let's just say that was an aberration. I believe that the club did overachieve. Last year, were they as bad as they were? Probably not. They probably should deserve to have a bit of a better faith, but, injuries, a lack of secondary scoring, it kind of bumps you down, and now you're hoping that they do improve with some better health. I think that where I see the Oilers this year is I see them competing for that wild card spot, and just being a bubble team. So we'll see what happens. I'm not overly sold that this is a team that's going to just go right back to where they were in 16-17. I think they're just kind of right in that bubble right now. So we'll see as teams improve in the Western Conference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still... This, to me, is going to be a really interesting season. A number of different storylines are going to play out. One of the big ones is, was Vegas, all show, or were they for real? That's probably, in my mind, that had a big part to do with, the repositioning of teams in the Western Conference. So we'll see what happens there, and exactly. And then the big question too about which year was the aberration for the Oilers. So I want to say thank you for coming on tonight, Shane. You've been a great guest, and you're as advertised. For those of you listening still, please make sure you get over to the Hockey Writers. Check out the Edmonton Oilers page on there, and you'll find lots of great articles, 375 of them, if I was listening correctly, that Shane has authored himself, and puts a lot of thought and effort into each and every one of them. Thank you for your insight today, and thank you for writing those. It's great for us fans to have a place that we can go get some opinions and some insight, and learn a little bit more about what's going on around the league and the Oilers in general. So thanks again for coming on.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. And if anybody is looking for some good summer reading, the only piece that I'll actually sit here and actually plug is my prospect series. I wrote 2 pieces that came out at the beginning of this month, and it's the top 20 prospects broken up into 2 pieces. It took me about 4 days to write the entire thing and actually do all my research and formulate my thoughts on it. So if there's one piece that you guys want to actually go out, get your hands on this summer until the season starts, that's probably the piece that I would probably recommend from you guys. So I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, you were talking before you even got on the air that you're coming down to Vancouver quite often. So yeah, we'll have to maybe do a live version of this. So
absolutely, that'd be a lot of fun.
We'll work on that. Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, have a good night, man. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. All right. Thanks, Shane. I'll probably have this published pretty quick.
Okay. So should I just,
appreciate it.
I guess just throw me just when you, I guess when you're going to throw it up on Twitter, just tag me in it, and then I can just retweet it, and I can do the social sport as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, I'll have you on again, and definitely, you know what? If we can do one live, that would be great too. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too. Okay. Good night.
Oilers Live.